Our presentation is on concussions and how to identify them in athletes. This is by Michael Curry and myself, Corey Rodzansky. So what exactly is a concussion? Well, a concussion is a traumatic brain injury that causes the brain to move rapidly. So you have your brain, which is sort of like a jello material, and it's inside your skull, which is very hard. So when you have that collision, your brain will move and it'll hit the inside of your skull. And now the issue with this is that the neurons inside your brain will actually stretch and bend, and this can damage them. And like I said, that concussion is caused by a blow to the head, when if you're a hard tackle in football or you fall, hit your head, this can cause a concussion. It can also be caused by shaking of the upper body or your head too rapidly, and here's a video that goes into more detail on that. This is just ancillary content here. We thought it was interesting, the question of the woodpecker. It bangs its head on trees all day, yet it doesn't get concussions. This is actually because their brains are packed in tighter. Think of like a person in a car with a seatbelt on, and also it's shaped differently, so they don't suffer concussions like the same way we do. So then on to the symptoms of a concussion. So basically, all this slide is showing is that there are many different symptoms, from headache, fatigue, nausea, lack of energy. There's many different things, many different symptoms for a concussion. And all of them are actually very difficult to test. They're very subjective. It's also difficult to diagnose the concussion in the context of sports, where physicians have to make quick decisions on whether to allow a player to return to the game or not, such as in football when a player has a big hit and they come off and the game's still going on and they want to get back in, but it may not be safe for them. Currently, there's a software used to test for concussion. It's called IMPACT. It's a neurocognitive assessment administered online in a controlled environment. It is the only FDA-cleared neurocognitive evaluation aid with concussion-specific indications. So who is it for? Well, IMPACT actually has two different tests. One for ages 5 to 11. This is for kids. It's shorter, it's more kid-friendly, it's designed to keep them engaged for a longer period of time. The one that we'll be talking about is for people ages 12 to 59. How long is the test? The test is 25 minutes long, and it is a baseline test given at the start of an athletic season to establish how the athlete performs at baseline. Once an injury is suspected, that same test is given. Both tests are used in conjunction to diagnose the concussion. Tests are both administered and read exclusively by licensed healthcare professionals. So what exactly is on it? Well, there's a series of tests given that range from recognizing shapes and colors to remembering numbers and letters. Some of the tests require quick reactions to visuals, while others test memory specifically. For example, the picture on the slide shows a portion of the test where you press one key for a blue square and then another key for a red circle. The shapes pop up rapidly and you're expected to react accordingly. Another example of a portion of the test actually links reaction and memory. Initially, they will show 3 letters such as A, P, and K. Then there will be a bank of numbers ranging from 1 to 25, all mixed randomly. The test will ask you to click on the numbers counting down from 25 as fast as you can. You have a limited amount of time, and sometimes you aren't able to get all the way to 1. Now once time is up, the test will then ask you to fill in the letters provided to you at the beginning, such as A, P. So currently, how do people recover from concussions? Well, I'm going to provide an outline for how people would return to activity. Now, it should be emphasized that symptoms of concussions may show up right after the injury or possibly a few days later. For this reason, it's important to note that patients can always revert back to an earlier stage of recovery. It's meant to be a gradual process and should be done with care. So the first step, and one of the most important ones, is rest. This means limiting physical activities of any kind as well as remembering activities. These types of activities can make concussion symptoms worse. Also, it is extremely important for the patient to be getting regular sleep as well as naps as needed. When a person has a concussion, their brain is injured and it needs to recover. As with any injury, sleep can be a time where it can heal. So the second step is returning to light activity. So once the patient begins to feel better, they can return to non-strenuous activities. For instance, they can participate in relaxing activities at home and gradually return to school. Again, if any of their symptoms get worse, they can scale it back and rest as needed. Sleep should continue to to be important as they progress through the second stage. However, naps should be limited to help with adjusting back to their normal schedule. And the third step, moderate activity. So as symptoms begin to disappear or become mild, the patient can return to most activities. They can still take breaks as needed and return to school completely. At this point, they should be back on their normal sleep cycle. Finally, when all symptoms have completely disappeared and no breaks are needed during activities, they should have no restrictions on anything that they do and should be back to their normal schedule.
Now that we have looked at the current ways concussions are identified and treated, let's look at the potential future of concussions. A better way to identify concussions is through the study of the blink reflex. The blink reflex has a long pathway that begins in the facial area and ends in the brainstem. The blink reflexometer acts as a machine that observes the pathway as a way to determine if a person has suffered a brain injury. The machine pumps 3 to 5 puffs of air randomly at one of their eyes over 20 seconds. Then there's a 20-second break and the process is repeated 2 more times. Next, physicians are able to observe whether the eye reflexes are different during active sports play as opposed to after a concussion event. Studies found that after a concussion event, athletes had decreased blink latency, increased differential latency, which is the time difference between the start of ipsilateral eye movement and the start of contralateral eye movement, larger lid excursions, a decreased log of time to open the eyes, and an increased log of the number of eye oscillations, which are the cycles of up and down upper eyelid movements after a blink. These findings allow for a quick, non-invasive, field-side way of determining if a player has a concussion and whether or not they should return to play. Once a concussion is able to be diagnosed more efficiently, the next step is to find ways to treat the brain injury more effectively. One area of interest is the expression of the leucine zipper-bearing kinase gene, LZK, in astrocytes. An astrocyte is a glial cell in the central nervous system. These cells do not conduct electrical impulses, but instead provide support and insulation between neurons. When the LZK gene is activated, the astrocytes undergo astrogliosis, which is an increase in the number of astrocytes produced. Increasing the expression of this gene in injured mice increased their injury response rate and resulted in the formation of smaller wounds because the scars were able to form more quickly. When the gene was underexpressed, the injury response rate was slower and the scars were larger because of the lack of astrogliosis. Further research is needed to determine how astrogliosis affects the ability of neurons to reconnect with each other and how the complex scar tissue improves. Finding better ways to identify and treat concussions is extremely important for the health of many athletes and people. However, there are many challenges researchers face, such as the short time frame between when a patient gets a brain injury and when they are able to participate in research studies. Most studies look at the biomarkers for concussions, and these biomarkers rapidly decrease after the time of the trauma. Also, patients are typically fatigued and confused after experiencing a concussion and do not want to participate in a study because they would rather rest. And lastly, most patients are athletes in school and are already falling behind in their classes due to the concussion. Therefore, they do not want to waste their time with the study when they can be preparing for their exams. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoyed our presentation.